Hello, everyone. So, in place of the Parashat Hashavua videos that I normally do, I'm gonna send out this piece, which will be a bit longer and broken into parts, and it's really about Purim and um, the mitzvot of Purim and the sort of backdrop of Purim. That's very important to understand if you're going to do this holiday in the way that our ancestors knew it and the way that our ancestors um, tried to hand it on to us. Um, and I'll also throw in some caveats and some understandings about how I think we might want to change Purim in the future. Um, to address some of the areas in which our ancestors made this holiday very hard to observe, almost impossible for many communities to observe. But everyone knows that Purim is a fun holiday. It's a lighthearted holiday. In many circles, it's downright raucous and rowdy and transgresses boundaries. It is a day where things, as they say, get turned upside down. And the bad guys become the good guys, and the good guys become the bad guys. People wear costumes and really step out of character for for a day to be joyful and to be irreverent and to essentially look at the world and say, "Wow, there's a lot of darkness out there, and we are going to insist on happiness and silliness." Um, in relation to this on this holiday. And that insistence on the joy aspect is a profound act of resistance, actually, in light of Jewish history, in light of the Megillah itself, the story of Esther itself. This is a holiday about the enormous amount of suffering in this world, and um, an acknowledgement of the beauty, and an acknowledgement that actually silliness and play is an essential aspect of life that allows us to engage with the darkness with humor and levity, at least on occasion, because that's essential. And it's a well-known characteristic of our culture, for example, that our humor comes from, um, or along with anyway, with an awareness of the darkness in the world. So Purim is very much a silly and lighthearted holiday, but if you're missing the backdrop of what it's against, then you're sort of missing what the holiday is about. So the actual backdrop of Purim begins in the Torah. Purim is not a biblical commandment. It is a rabbinical tradition. It is a tradition that was um, created by the character of Esther in the book of the Megillah, which, by the way, is probably not a historical book at all, and probably was written as a melodrama and as kind of a comedy. And so the characters of the story, the setting, none of it seems to have ever existed. So clearly they're playing with something here, and it may be quasi-historical or at best historical smut, but it is not a historical book. So this holiday was established apparently by this mythical character named Esther, which is interesting in and of itself. The story goes, in the Torah, there is a point at which the Israelites have a schism amongst themselves. They have a tremendous argument, and in the wake of that tremendous argument, the stress that happens uh, amongst the Israelites in the desert, right at the end of that argument, Amalek comes. And Amalek is the name of a people, named, as many of the ancient Near East people were, named Middle East, named for the progenitor of that people, the leader of that people. So Amalek is both a person and a, and a, and a, tribe. 'Cause, 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 The Amalek comes and attacks the Israelites, and he specifically attacks those who are, as the Torah says, straggling in the rear. They're the people who are the most vulnerable of the Israelites. They are attacked, and as a result of this attack upon the Israelites, the Torah gives a commandment for the Jews for all time, which is to erase the memory of Amalek from underneath the heaven. So in its in its simple form, and I don't think it's simple, the commandment is actually upon Jews to this day that if you met an Amalekite, regardless of age or gender or anything, the mitzvah is that you have to kill them. Luckily for us, there have been no Amalekites for at least 2,000 years. By the time of the rabbis, 2,000 years ago, the or 1,500 years ago, maybe the Amalekites were said to have assimilated into the other nations, and there were no Amalekites left. So, in practice, that mitzvah is no longer relevant. But also, there are mitzvot in the Torah that are given, and the proper way to observe that mitzvah is to never do it. So I think you can argue that this is one of those mitzvot that is actually given actually given to sort of tell us what not to do. Um, because the people of the Amalekites assimilated into the nations long ago and are no longer a people, Amalek remains in Jewish texts and Jewish tradition as a kind of force, as a kind of archetype. Specifically, it's an archetype of those who want to destroy Jews. So Amalek is a force that tries to destroy Jews and to destroy the Jewish soul. Because it remains as an archetype, certain people or peoples are still referred to as Amalek. But if we look at what the characteristic of Amalek is, which is to attack the weak and the vulnerable, really unprovoked, but to attack the weak and the vulnerable, is seen as anathema and is actually seen as anathema to the Jewish way. The Jewish way is to care for the weak and the vulnerable, not to destroy them. Amalek is actually a force that lives in everybody. There is anti-Semitism out there. There are people who would like to destroy the Jews, and so we remember Amalek. We remember Amalek, and in fact, we are commanded to remember what Amalek did to us on the way every day. It is one of 6 remembrances that is commanded in the Torah that are numbered amongst the 613 mitzvot that tell us that we are to remember these things every day. And one of those remembrances is to remember what Amalek did to us on the way. So there are these forces in the world that would like to destroy Jews, would like to rid themselves of Jews, would like to destroy the soul of the Jewish people. Let's not be naive about that. It is out there. But the truth is that Amalek exists in all of us. And this is the background um, against which the story of Purim takes place. How so? Well, Mordechai, this battle between Amalek and the Jews is sort of set up as a cosmic thing, a cosmic struggle, that there are forces of evil who want to destroy the Jewish people, and that is sort of an eternal battle. So the stage is set in the holiday of Purim in Megillat Esther, in the book of Esther, where Mordechai and Esther are the archetypal Jews, and Haman is the archetype of Amalek. In fact, the Megillah tells us um, that Haman is the descendant of Amalek. So it's seen as this sort of there are these two peoples on earth who have an eternal battle. And even if the Amalekites disappear, there will still be this force in the world that we call Amalek. So the cosmic battle is here in the story of Esther between the Jews and between Amalek. One of the practices of Purim is that the Shabbat before Purim is called Shabbat Zachor. And in Parashat Zachor, in Zachor, we read special readings, and they are probably the most powerfully repugnant passages in all of Tanakh that have to do with God commanding genocide against the Amalekites, ancient Amalekites in various parts of the Tanakh, and and that's what we read. It's terrible, terrible, terrible Shabbat reading. And in fact, I will talk about this later, but I think it's actually a chilul Shabbat. It's a desecration of Shabbat to read Zachor on Shabbat. Those are not themes that are Shabbistic, and in fact, they're themes that need to be dealt with and considered and taken more seriously than you can take them on a Shabbat. So I think it's a bad idea. It was a bad idea for the rabbis to do Shabbat Zachor. Um, but what Zachor does is present the reality that the forces of Amalek exist within us as Jews and within our culture. We are no different from other human beings. Amalek is a force that says, I want to expunge the world of whoever the perceived enemy is. And it's a form of corporate punishment. It's a form of um, yeah, form of corporate punishment is what Amalek is about. So without question, this is something that Jews possess in ourselves. We possess the power of Amalek within us, and um, Amalek, and we see that in readings from the Tanakh, but we also see that in modern current events, the ways that the poor and vulnerable people are attacked by Jews um, as a form of sort of corporate punishment against real enemies, right? So so this is the import of Parashat Zachor that that we read about the presence of this very same phenomena within us. We are simply not better than other human beings. We just are not. On a spiritual level, on a Jewish level, our goal is to rise above those human tendencies and to find a different way of being, other than the force of Amalek, which is to destroy, to annihilate, and to particularly with regard to um, attacking vulnerable people. So this is the very, very dark background. So Mordechai and Esther, the Jews, are up against Haman, and it's seen as this cosmic battle and this cosmic, and like anti-Semitism is seen as a cosmic force um, that is always present in the world. Okay, so that's one of the practices of Purim. It's one that I think needs to be changed because I think Purim should be a time for reflecting on and acknowledging the presence of Amalek in the world, not just in other people, and not just in terms of what of the hatred that is directed towards us, but it is also and it is, by the way, simultaneously a celebration of Am Yisrael Chai. We're still here, and we're still celebrating, and we're still being silly on a Purim on Purim. If you look into Hasidic literature about Purim and Kabbalistic literature, you will find that in the ether in which they are speaking, and in the air that they are breathing and speaking about the tradition, they are conscious of this side of Purim. And that is partly because there are hints of understanding Purim in this way throughout the tradition. So, for example, the Talmud remarkably says that um, when the Mashiach comes and the world is redeemed, all the other holidays will become moot except for Purim. We will still practice Purim. Why? Why? What does that mean about Purim? What does that mean? That in the days when the Mashiach comes and there is no anti-Semitism, why do we need Purim? Um, it's something else. It has some deeper layer of meaning. The Talmud also says that part of the practice of Purim is to become, for some people, it's not a universal practice, but for some people, it is to become so inebriated that you can no longer tell the difference between the bad guys and the good guys. It is to sort of break down the barriers and to see something fundamental about humans and and acknowledge that there is this thing amongst humans where we all where all humans are capable and possess the potential of saying, I want the world to be expunged of this group or that group or whatever that is, and to think sort of corporately about groups of people instead of individual evildoers or specific instances of evil. We're applying a sort of, we're applying a generalization to whole groups of people based on the actions, inevitably almost. It's based on the actions of a very few. Teaching, they also taught have this teaching about how Purim is a time of turning things upside down, which is to invert the way you would normally look at things. So, for example, if you normally think of yourself as a Jew as a victim of hatred, this is a way of flipping things upside down to see how do we hate? How do we hate? How are we complicit in the continued existence of Amalek? What is our responsibility? What does it mean nowadays, when there are no Amalekites physically? There's no actual people, the Amalekites anymore. How do we continue the work of erasing the memory of Amalek from underneath the heavens? So all of this is in the background, and it gets more and more profound, where you see in the Hasidic and Kabbalistic writings them wrestling with the presence of evil in the world, including within ourselves and within the tradition of Judaism. And to me, that kind of self-consciousness, that self-reflection is Jewish. And to really do anything other than that, so to just play the victim or just speak about anti-Semitism on a holiday where it seems to me there's all this emphasis on trying to look at ourselves, um, that's the Jewish way. The Jewish way is to reflect on yourself and understand, how am I complicit in harm? How am I complicit in 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 ongoing hatred in the world, while at the same time acknowledging, we don't erase, we acknowledge that there are people who have that same kind of hatred towards us and ascribe kind of corporate qualities to the entire Jewish people. um, when it's we are you can't do that to us or any people. One of the most profound hints that they give to us um, is that Purim is like Yom HaKippurim, right? Or the other way around. Yom Kippur is Kippurim. It's like Purim. So somehow Yom Kippur and Purim are seen as somehow connected. They're sort of opposite each other on the calendar. Um, and and by playing with words, you can make Purim be part of Yom HaKippurim or Yom Kippurim, um, to show that they are somehow related. And then you're left wondering, how in the world are these two holidays related? They're very, very different. But if you just simply take in the idea of tshuva, the idea that we are here to repair, we are here to make tikkunim in the world, to repair the harm that has been created in the past, and to keep working towards a repaired whole future. Um, Even though we don't necessarily know what that looks like, it is a constant process trying to understand how, what does it mean to make the world a better place? What does it look like when it is a better place? And that is an ongoing process, and you don't, it's an aspiration. You don't expect to get there. You expect to continually work toward it. So we're gonna stop here and I'll make a break here. Um, and just to close this one again with the idea that the aspiration here, the idea here is aspirational, that we are always working toward something. In fact, it would be a mistake for us to think that we know what that looks like because we won't know. If we're if our ultimate goal is to reach a place of shalom, for example, a place of peace, which in Hebrew connotes wholeness, right? In order to have wholeness, there's only one way to do it. You have to have all the pieces. You have to have all the pieces, and you have to figure out how all the pieces fit. But we're working on a puzzle where we don't know all the pieces and we don't know where they go. But we don't know where all the pieces go yet, but we're working toward that.